They was hating on the kid, that's fine. I'ma make a movie out these niggas one time. Don't you worry about the time it took. Just know that the bullets in the magazine enough to paint a comic book. Niggas all kinda shook. Round here, niggas bear enough arms and get compared to an octopus. Check out the pages of my comic book. Cannons get hand drawn. Ain't nothing sketchy when you plot a jokes. A burning flame in this comic book. Everything could change. I turn the page and it's comic. Hey yo, my city rotten. In a day of flower blossom when the sun fade. Every night it turn to Gotham, Batman and Robin. Not the heroes, but it happens when the op gets spotted. They whoop your ass and pat your pockets. Marvelous, everything real. Bitch, I never lied. Magneto lifting my arms to let the metal fly. All black Nina, call it black woman storm. But it rain on you niggas, don't get caught up in the storm. Don't you worry about the time it took. Just know that the bullets in the magazine enough to paint a comic book. Niggas all kinda shook. Round here, niggas bear enough arms and get compared to an octopus. Check out the pages of my comic book. Cannons get hand drawn. Ain't nothing sketchy when you plot a jokes. A burning flame in this comic book. Everything could change. I turn the page and it's comic book. Peter Parker, so why do niggas think I hang with them? When every time they around, my spidey sense tangling. Bodies on nice for trying to be dead cool. Bodies in the water, that's how you make a dead pool. I bring carnage to these niggas, be an idiot. Dressed in all black, kinda looking like the symbiote. No matter if these niggas hating on me, I will never be a character erased from the story. Don't you worry about the time it took. Just know that the bullets in the magazine enough to paint a comic book. Niggas all kinda shook. Round here, niggas bear enough arms and get compared to an octopus. Check out the pages of my comic book. Cannons get hand drawn. Ain't nothing sketchy when you plot a jokes. A burning flame in this comic book. Everything could change. I turn the page in this comic book.
Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowances made for fair use for purpose such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statutes that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips in the balance of the favor of fair use. Welcome to Blended Healing in the next episode in reviewing Project 2025 and what it means to us and what can we expect. A lot of people feel as though Project 2025 is just a blueprint that's not going to happen and being referred to other CRs that we should read instead. I say it's all smoke and mirrors because by the trajectory of the things that are going on, you need to be ready and not get ready. Feel me? So comments are truly welcomed in this discussion tonight, but keep it cute because my block game is real swift and so are my moderators. Be respectful. Okay. The Heritage Foundation is a think tank focused on promoting conservative public policies. Project 2025 is a blueprint to consolidate power within the executive or the office of the president and weaken democratic structures. It's an extremist playbook that details sweeping changes to give tremendous power to the executive branch, while discarding the checks and balances that were designed by the United States Constitution's framers to prevent a single branch of government from obtaining too much power. This proposal to radically expand the president's authority will reverse the civil rights protections on which Black communities have relied on for decades to exercise their full citizenship and to prevent a return to a repressive governmental authority. Under Project 2025's policy agenda, any future president could consolidate executive powers to have unilateral control over all federal decision making, with little regard to the laws passed by Congress or to the Supreme Court's decision interpreting the laws and the United States Constitution. You see, critics have warned that concentrating federal authority solely in the hands of the president could jeopardize basic rule of law principles, including not one, including the president, is above the law. Project 2025 represents a direct and deliberate threat to Black communities across 7 key states. Addressed is civil rights, education, political participation, the criminal legal system, housing, reproductive rights, and environmental protections. At its core, it aims to dismantle essential agencies and regulations that protect civil rights while promoting an anti-democratic and an anti-justice initiatives that will weaponize civil rights enforcement by federal agencies. These proposals are designed to erode the very principles of equality, justice, and fairness that form the foundation of our democracy. And the impact would be devastating. Project 2025 will harm Black communities by weakening anti-discrimination laws and cutting essential worker protections. It will eliminate key safeguards that protect Black workers and bar federal agencies from collecting racial demographic data, making it harder to enforce anti-discrimination laws and combat racial inequalities, especially in the workplace. Limiting access to quality education for Black students. The education and wealth gap for Black students and workers by dismantling the Department of Education, the agency responsible for ensuring civil rights protections in schools, which will allow discriminatory discipline practices to go unchecked. Project 2025 will expand the ongoing coordinated attack on truth in schools and libraries, which will further deny our nation's shameful legacy of racism. It will also make higher education even more inaccessible for Black students by privatizing student loans and eliminating student loan forgiveness programs and income-based repayment options. Undermining Black political power. By overhauling the United States Census Bureau and criminalizing election related offenses, Project 2025 will weaken the political influence of Black communities by undercounting them and suppressing the Black vote through threats and intimidation, destabilizing the key foundations of our multiracial democracy. Promoting punitive criminal legal policies will likely increase the use of the racially discriminatory death penalty, which is infected with racial bias and with rife with wrongful convictions that disproportionately impact Black people. Additionally, it will endanger Black communities and roll back efforts to address police misconduct that violates the United States Constitution by abolishing federal consent decrees that hold law enforcement accountable for civil rights violation, jeopardizing Black families' access to affordable housing. Project 2025 will transfer control of critical housing programs that expand access to affordable housing, like Section 8, to states, including those with a history of racial discrimination, threatening the housing stability of millions of Black low income families, threatening reproductive rights and the health of Black people, Black pregnant people who already face disproportionately high maternal mortality rates will be hit the hardest by Project 2025's restrictions on reproductive health, which include proposals to ban federal access to abortion care and criminalizing healthcare providers, given that 42% of women seeking abortion care are Black. These proposals will have devastating consequences for their health and autonomy, and the health and autonomy of their families, exacerbating health disparities caused by environmental racism. By shutting down the Office of Environmental Justice, Project 2025 will allow the federal government to turn a blind eye to the president and increasing environmental racism that is causing severe health disparities in Black communities, leaving Black people even more vulnerable to pollution and hazardous living conditions. As alarming as the threat of Project 2025, it does not have to be our destiny. It does not have to be. At this critical moment, when Project 2025 aims to reverse civil rights protections for Black people and concentrate power in the hands of the privileged few to the detriment of our democracy as a whole. All communities must come together to fight for truth, justice, and equality as the cornerstones of our shared future. Equality is under fire. threats to civil rights protections, and equal opportunity. Project 2025 will curtail Black people's civil rights. It will dismantle the civil rights tools that people living in the United States have relied on for decades to create a fairer and more inclusive society and economy, and eliminate federal policies and practices that help ensure equal opportunities for Black people. These proposals, from ending data collection on race to weakening the government's ability to fight discrimination, will frustrate efforts to remedy racial inequality. Opponents of civil rights are already working to turn those proposals into reality. In terms of civil rights enforcement, Project 2025 will harm Black communities by preventing the enforcement of anti discrimination laws, by halting the collection of workforce data. The United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, the federal agency charged with investigating and prosecuting employment complaints, collects data from large employers and federal contractors on the race and gender composition of their workforce. These disclosures make it harder for employers to hide discrimination and help civil rights enforcement agencies identify organizations that may be violating the law. Project 2025 will weaken the federal government's ability to identify and fight employment discrimination by preventing the collection of race and gender data. From access to clean water to fair employment conditions, federal agencies touch nearly every aspect of our daily lives. The importance of a politically independent federal workforce that represents the full range of talent in the country cannot be overstated. The federal government is the country's largest employer, with more than 2 million employees total from every state and territory. The federal government also employs a higher percentage of Black people than the civilian workforce. Despite the greater representation in the government workforce, Black federal workers are still less likely to hold senior positions than they are in private sector. Federal agencies operate programs to help ensure a fair workplace and proactively prevent employment discrimination, such as initiatives that promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, the DEIA. These programs can serve as models for the private sector. Project 2025 proposes eliminating the federal DEIA programs, which will make it harder for the federal government to meet its civil rights obligations and to deter private employers from implementing similar programs. Project 2025 will also strip an estimated 50,000 federal employees, of their rights and make it easier to replace those nonpartisan experts with political appointees who would do what future presidents want, regardless of whether it's good policy. The federal law prohibits employers and recipients of federal funding from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, gender, or disability status. These laws and regulations prohibit both disparate treatment, explicitly treating people differently based on race or other protected characteristics, and disparate impact, which is policies or practices that appear neutral but result in an unjustifiable discriminatory effect. You see, disparate impact claims also play a role in uncovering discriminatory intent by permitting plaintiffs to counteract unconscious prejudices and disguised animus that escape easy classification as disparate treatment. This is particularly important as bad actors have become better at concealing discrimination and discriminatory practices or motives. Project 2025 will also dismantle the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, the FCC, the federal agency that ensures that taxpayer dollars do not go to discriminatory contractors, and repeal Executive Order 11246, which prohibits most federal contractors from discriminating based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. Furthermore, Project 2025 calls for the federal government to eliminate civil rights protections for entire communities by removing prohibitions against discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics in employment, education, and federally funded programs. These proposals will collectively make it more challenging to root out discrimination faced by Black or just regular LGBTQ plus people. Discrimination based on race and gender remains a persistent problem in the United States, and the EEOC consistently receives more complaints alleging race and gender discrimination each year than it does for discrimination based on other protected characteristics. Yet Project 2025 directs the EEOC to reorientate its enforcement priorities and limit its investigations on alleged race and gender discrimination, even though they are the most common complaints. In addition, Project 2025 calls on the Department of Justice and the EEOC to investigate and prosecute state and local governments, colleges, universities, and private employers that have policies and practices intended to advance racial equity, including trainings to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Several state attorney generals have similarly threatened legal actions against employers and higher education institutions that seek to promote equity. Can I say that to you one more time? One more time. Several state attorney generals have similarly threatened legal action against employers and higher education institutes that seek to promote equity, and legal organizations that oppose civil rights have argued that programs aimed at remedying discrimination harm white men. Project 2025 will turn civil rights enforcement on its head by targeting programs designed to increase equal opportunity. One of the most important tools in civil rights enforcement is the ability to challenge disparate impact discrimination by employers, federal funding recipients, and other actors. In a 1971 case, Griggs versus Duke Power, a group of black workers sued their employer for racial discrimination, claiming that the company imposed unnecessary requirements that disproportionately excluded black workers from certain jobs, even though the company did not explicitly consider race. In Griggs, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that not only overt discrimination, but also practices that fair, informed, but discriminatory in operation. It violated federal law unless these practices are justified by legitimate purpose. Duke Powers requirements created an unlawful disparate impact because they operated as built in headwinds for minority groups and were unrelated to measuring job capability. Subsequent Supreme Court decisions and guidance by federal agencies have likewise found that other civil rights statutes also prohibit policies that have a disparate racial impact. In the decades since the Supreme Court decided Griggs, black communities and the federal government have used disparate impact claims to challenge numerous discriminatory policies, including inequitable disaster recovery funding, unequal access to water, sanitation, and transportation, disproportionate exposure to environmental harms, and employment restrictions based on past arrest and convictions. Federal agencies have also provided guidance explaining how emerging practices violate the law, such as employers' use of an algorithm decision making tools like resume screening tools used with AI, and disproportionately exclude Black applicants and workers without justification. You see, in order to comply with non discrimination obligations. Many organizations have voluntarily adopted policies and practices that seek to recruit, retain, and support talented individuals of all backgrounds. Research has shown that dedicated DEIA teams, mentoring programs, and other efforts can counteract unfair barriers that often exclude qualified Black employees. These programs play an essential role in mitigating the risk of future discrimination and harassment by ensuring that current policies do not freeze the status quo of prior discriminatory employment practices. The DEIA initiatives, such as affinity groups, mentorship programs, and programs that offer opportunities for students to connect with faculty and staff, have improved academic outcomes in post secondary education, such as re enrollment in classes and graduation rates. Researchers have also found that educator diversity results in improved reading and math skills, as well as lower absenteeism and suspension rates for students of color. Nevertheless, the United States has yet to achieve the goal of a society in which educational and employment opportunities are equally open to all. Black students continue to experience discrimination that limits their ability to access educational opportunities and succeed in pre kindergarten through high school and higher education institutions. In a recent study that found that 1 in 5 Black students experiences discrimination in college and university campuses, and Black students attending the least racially diverse schools experience discrimination more frequently. Black workers are overrepresented in dangerous jobs with worse pay and fewer benefits. Even as the number of Black people with college degrees has increased in the past 20 years, Black people continue to work in a lower wage jobs and less lucrative industries than white people with similar levels of education. Let's talk about it. More than 1 in 4 Black women work in the lowest wage jobs, such as childcare, housekeeping, and social work. Black people also experience unemployment at a rate twice as high of that of white people and face higher unemployment rates when compared to white workers with the same educational attainment, skills, or residential location. Given these ongoing disparities, it is a surprising that in fiscal year 2023, the EEOC received more than 81,600 employment discrimination complaints. More than a third of these complaints were for race discrimination, and an additional 30% for gender discrimination. Tools such as workforce data collection requirements, disparate impact, liability, and the DEIA programs remain vital to ensure that Black people have equal access to opportunities. Project 2025 will roll back these advancements and thereby permit employers, schools, and other entities that receive federal taxpayer dollars to discriminate. It proposes using endorsement, federal enforcement tools to attack state and local governments, employers, and other private parties that are trying to remove barriers to opportunity in their own institutions. Under Project 2025 policy agenda, Black communities, particularly those in the South, are you paying attention? Will be vulnerable to abuses from people and institutions with the most economic and political power. In the face of these attacks, all Americans must redouble their commitment to achieving an economy and society where everyone can succeed and where thriving is the standard. You see, the foundation of a thriving multiracial democracy is a society in which high quality education, good jobs, and economic mobility are available to all, regardless of your race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or other protected characteristics. All Americans benefit from workplaces and institutions where everyone is valued and can contribute their skills and perspectives. Talent is everywhere. Policymakers must ensure that opportunity is too. Removing barriers for Black people and other historically marginalized groups increase opportunities for all. Closing racial gaps in wages and access to financial and educational resources will help grow the economy. Due to discrimination since 2000, the United States has lost out on $16 trillion in goods and services as the nation becomes increasingly diverse. Creating an inclusive and equitable society is an even greater moral and economic imperative. Project 2025 will dismantle the Department of Education and eliminate civil rights protections for all students, especially Black students. Project 2025 calls for the federal government to abolish the Department of Education, the agency tasked with enforcing civil rights in education, distributing federal funding, and administering programs to address inequities in educational access and participation, dismantling, dismantling the ED and reshuffling oversight of its programs to states and other federal agencies as the Department of Justice and the Census Bureau will severely undermine federal efforts to provide accessible, inclusive, and high quality public education for all students, from early childhood to higher education, in a safe learning environment that does not threaten their civil rights. These policy proposals will destabilize the United States system of public education. Project 2025 calls for sweeping action to ensure that any guidance or regulation that interprets Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits federal funding recipients from discriminating based in on race, color, or national origin, explicitly rejects the disparate impact theory of liability based on the erroneous assumption that permitting claims of discrimination based on disparate impact overts the purpose of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It claims that the federal overreach has pushed many school leaders to prioritize the pursuit of racial parity in school discipline over schools' student safety. Eliminating the disparate impact theory of liability will hamstring the federal government's ability to fulfill its legal obligations to protect students from all forms of discrimination, including school discipline. This is particularly important in cases where schools or school districts have well documented histories of disproportionately meeting our um, vetting out punishment to black students for allegedly violating facially neutral policies, proper endorsement of which requires the ability to bring claims based on disparate impact. Numerous Supreme Court decisions and more than 25 federal agencies have previously upheld the disparate impact theory to find unlawful discrimination. In a joint guidance letter issued in 2014, the ED and the DOJ clarified that schools also violate the federal law when they even handedly implement facially neutral policies and practices that, although not adopted with the intent to discriminate, nonetheless have unjustified effect of discriminating against students based on their race. This guidance, which Project 2025 denounces as an overreach in Title VI enforcement, is vital to fostering safe, positive school climates and improving academic achievement, especially for Black students. An analysis of data conducted by the Civil Rights Data Collection In 2015-2016 school year revealed that Black students and other students of color were more likely to be suspended from school and therefore have less time learning in the class. This finding is not unique. Black students have consistently experienced and continue to experience higher rates of discipline in schools for largely subjective reasons, such as disruptive behavior and punishments that are way off the meat rack for Black students are more often severe than those given to their white peers for similar, even the same behavior. The disproportionate frequency and severity of discipline for Black students in school contributes not only to the overrepresentation of Black students in referrals to law enforcement, but also to the diversion of Black youth from schools to prison. All students deserve a safe environment in schools and to be protected from the disproportionate punishment. Project 2025 calls to eliminate Head Start and to prioritize funding for home based childcare and not universal daycare. Will compound racial achievement gaps. Head Start is a federally funded program that provides early childhood education, health, and family support services to low income children to promote school readiness. The National Head Start program has served approximately 39 million children and families since it started in 1965. Between 2021 and 2022, the program enrolled over 800,000 students and pregnant people, with Black participants composing the second largest share of enrollees at about 28%. Early childhood education programs like Head Start have clear benefits for Black children and offer a promising strategy to close racial achievement gaps, especially if policyholders, policymakers prioritize preschool perform 17% points higher on a cognitive assessment compared to Black children who did not participate in preschool. Early education programs not only benefit children's learning outcomes, but also foster healthy parenting dynamics and well being. Caregivers who participated in Head Start programs were more emotionally supportive of their children and more engaged in their early learning than parents who did not. Intervention such as Head Start can also have positive inter- intergenerational effects to children of mothers exposed to the program exhibited long-term benefits including increases in wages and educational attainment. Moreover, access to early education, Head Start, or universal child care facilitates increased educational attainment and labor force engagement, particularly among Black parents. Although research illustrates that access to quality, federally supported and early childhood education benefits both children and their families, Project 2025 will disrupt rather than invest in early childhood programs. Well, I'm going to stop this right here. When we meet again, we'll be talking about defunding the public education and changing student loan policies to privilege wealthier families. I want to thank you for stopping by Blended Healing on tonight, today, in the morning, wherever you may be. Like I said, you have to be ready for the changes of 2025. I'm not fear mongering, I'm just keeping it a buck. You got to know where you stand. Please take off the rose-colored glasses and trying to make excuses that this is going to get better. And that in order for us to even to get on a better track, we have to go through the worst to get there. I know that our community is ready for it. We've always been ready for it. It's time to hunker down, get your finances in order, get your house in order, and be prepared. Ashe, Ashe. All right, until next time, we'll talk about this again. Be well, stay safe, stay safe, stay safe. Stay safe. And stay well. And happy holidays to each and every one of you. Happy holidays. Enjoy your family. Enjoy the things that truly do matter, because that is in your control. All right. Talk to y'all soon. Be well.
Who they think they better than? Ain't no comparison to the so-called black or African American. You can drop the African, keep the American. When we say Aborigine and make their world in, I'm going in the same dirt my ancestors buried in. I come from a god and a goddess, so what that make me? Not even Basquiat can trace me. Not even Van Gogh can paint me. The MC in me is the god of the sea. Who's the god in me? I'm focused in, let my mind be free. You too blind to see. The Jews I give is real. It's been real. These ain't shots, they missiles. All you gonna hear is the whistle. Lyrically, it's the execution. My verses start revolutions. From my people seeking restitution. Since the beginning, fuck evolution. Or maybe my reality is all a dream. I put it together like I was sowing seeds. So it seems this is that audio dopamine. Go against the machine. We put you where nobody can hear you scream. And sing you to meet your Elohim. My nigga, this is savage mode. It's something that you can't go. It started with a spark and I'ma let it explode. I was given the cheat codes that'll let me jump and reload and go through them waves like a fucking torpedo. You dealt the cards of life. I just cut them diamonds with the ace of spades. Y'all scatter like roaches when they facing raid, or vampires when they facing blade. I'm trying to get extra terrain like I'm getting played. You still stuck as a mental slave. You still stuck in that mental cage while I'm making easy money, pimping holes in style. It's my coming to age. Crowd roaring when I'm coming on stage, and when I'm done, they gonna be cheering my name. Great times, and nah, I ain't quit my day job. I spit bars. I really rap on my day off. That's real shit. Just give you some tools you can build with. Aim high, even if you still miss. Just keep going. It's a climb to the top, and I'ma keep flowing. Down Lake Shore, I'm Chicago going.